me down the gates. I can hold them off a little longer.
Nope.
You ready?
Too late. Yep.
No, we're going? Okay, all right. In that case, I am gonna call this meeting of the Woodland Planning Commission to order. Let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all. Just a quick reminder about why we're here. The role of the Planning Commission is to hold workshops, to review and make recommendations to the City Council on all manner of policy and legislative activities. In some cases, we act as a quasi-judicial board for land use cases, which can then be appealed to either the council, the hearings examiner, or a court. You take the roll, please.
Commissioner Mattson.
Present.
Commissioner Taylor.
Here.
Commissioner Jensen.
Here.
Commissioner Witten.
Here.
Did I say that right?
All right, so it seems like a good time to acknowledge some changes on the Planning Commission. We have a new commissioner here this evening, Tiffany Witten. Are you interested in saying anything about yourself? Introduce you to us.
Well, I'm on the planning commission because I am interested in where our town is going. And I have some real estate background and have lived here roughly 15 years and have seen some significant change and I'm interested in where and why we're going, where we're going.
Okay, outstanding. Glad to have you aboard. First tip, you gotta get real close to these microphones.
I gotta sit on it?
Pretty much, gotta pretty much swallow it. And I believe this is Connie's last evening with us, so I would like to thank you for stepping in and completing the unexpired term that you did and serving on the commission. It's been a pleasure working with you. Thanks for your service to the city. If you want to say anything, you can. Okay, great.
It's been a real pleasure working with you, Connie.
Thank you.
All right, let's move along on the agenda then. First up is citizen communications for items not on the agenda. Do we have any? It's a full house tonight. I don't have any cards, I don't think.
No, that's all okay.
Okay, next up then is approving the agenda.
I move to approve the agenda.
Okay,
I second the motion.
motion's been made and seconded. Anyone opposed? All right, motion carries. Next up on the agenda is the election of officers. I would suggest that we postpone that one more month. There is at least one other change and maybe another change coming. So we've been putting this off for a long time, but I think we should put it off one more month. So I believe I need a motion for that.
I move that we postpone election of officers until the July 2019 meeting.
I second that motion.
All right. Anyone opposed? Great, motion carries. Moving right along, next up is approval of minutes from May 17th meeting. I didn't find anything objectionable in the minutes.
Anything else? I move that we approve the minutes from May 16th.
Second that if I'm not, if I wasn't present.
I wish you would.
Okay, I'll second that.
All right, fantastic. Motion has been made and seconded. Is anyone opposed?
I will abstain.
Okay, do you wanna mention why?
I wasn't here.
She was
Okay,
up there, that's why I
perfect.
was like, can I second it if I wasn't there?
That's what I wondered about that.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, if there's gonna be abstain, let's go ahead and call the roll just to, or, take a roll call vote just to, so it's less confusing.
Can, okay, sorry.
Is that all right?
Yeah.
Councilmember Jensen.
Aye.
Councilmember Mattson.
Aye.
Councilmember Connie. Oh, sorry, Taylor.
Abstain.
Councilmember Witten.
Aye.
All right, motion carries. Thanks a lot, everybody. Moving on. Gonna open the public hearing for item ZTA-19-004, review of the Woodland School District Capital Facilities Plan 2019 through 2025, and the recommended school impact fees adopted through Resolution 1902 by the Woodland School Board. All right, I don't think we need to ask about conflict of interest on this. Travis, you have a staff report for us?
I'm missing one piece from my remote control. I guess I'll be doing this sitting down today.
Okay.
I can change this.
Oh. So for the record, my name is Travis Goddard. I'm the Community Development Director for the City of Woodland. And the case we're gonna talk about tonight is ZTA 1904, which is zoning text amendment for the capital facilities plan from the school district. The school district has asked us to review the impact fee rate the city charges and to adopt the revised capital facilities plan. So this is our current impact fee rate. It shows that single-family residential is charged $5,000. Duplexes are charged $5,000 for both sides. Triplexes and fourplexes, $5,000 for all sides. ADUs, $650. Condominiums and townhomes, which are units on their own individual lots, $5,000 per unit. And then apartments is $600 for a one bedroom, or $650 for one bedroom. 2 bedrooms are $1,850, and 3 bedrooms are $2,500. So depending on how many units are in an apartment building, we would calculate the impact fees based upon the number of rooms in each unit.
Can I stop you real quick?
Sure.
Can we go back to that? So for the duplex, that's, for the whole duplex, it would still be 5,000?
No.
It's 2,500 for the whole deal, okay.
So we're debating this, yes, theoretically, like for a fourplexes actually pay $1,250
Okay,
each unit, which is a quarter of what they would pay. And we're gonna get into the disparity later on when we talk about student generation rates.
All right, may I ask a question since you're here?
Sure.
Are manufactured homes considered single-family residences?
Single-family residential. Yeah.
Thank you.
So capital facilities plan 2019 to 2025, it was adopted by the school board with resolution 1902 on April 8th, 2019, and that's when it was forwarded to the city for review and updating. So I'll pick some information out of that so we kind of all start from the same point, and that is the projected enrollment numbers that they use. Their current numbers are these numbers here for the K through 4th grade, 992, 5 through 8, 727, and 9 through 12 is 769, for a total of 2488. And within the next 6 years, they expect it to grow to 3,064. So the difference being on the next slide, sorry, this is slow. Oh, sorry, there we go. Okay, I'm wondering why the clicker's not working. So my clicker is behind me. Her thumb is not as fast as mine. So the projected capacity needs, so the elementary school current capacity 903, projected enrollment is 1244, so that means there's a need of 341 student spaces or desks at the elementary level, 97 at the middle school, and 10 at the high school. So, what they do is they then rolled into, okay, what are the capacity needs, the facility capacity needs, and so they estimate that they're going to need an additional capacity at the high school, which is $59 million, about $59 million. New elementary school, this is actually broken into two line items here. There's the property acquisition for $2 million, and elementary school itself at about $20 million. So they're also looking at some portable movement, and it's about $200,000 for a 6-year projection of capital improvements of $80 million.
I'm not following that exactly. The high school that they built 5 years ago is going to need 58 million of upgrades.
So I will let you ask that of the applicant.
Okay, I'm just.
Because I'm only presenting.
Is that
what's in-
your understanding of this chart, too?
That's
Okay.
the way I read it, yes.
Okay.
And so the next thing that they talk about is the capital facility funding that they have in there. So currently, they will be able to secure $60 million worth of funding, and the unsecured total funding is about $20 million. Of that, so they break it down into state construction funds and bonding capacity. But their shortfall, which is about $20 million. And of that, their impact fee projection, it looks like they have about $120,000 currently, and they're looking for $495,000. So the school board has recommended that we change our impact fees to $5,900 straight across the board. So for the record, their last facilities plan update, they requested $5,000 across the board, and the city came up with this funky $5,000, $2,500, $1,250, $650. Those were all kind of generated by the city. They were not requested by the school board.
When was their last increase?
Last update was
2015, I believe.
Okay.
And then the city requested to come back in 2 years.
Okay, thank you.
So how you arrive at impact fees is actually laid out in the Growth Management Act, and we've adopted, this is our impact fee calculation model, and it means nothing to me.
Looks pretty simple.
Yes, that's right. So what they did is, the next slide will show us, they run through the individual calculations, and I printed this on 11x17 and left it on your table so that you don't have to squint or even read the screen, because it's a little more readable on that. So the improvements are by school, elementary, middle, and high. And you'll see that the elementary school, the $19 million of improvements is in the first column. Middle school is 0 improvements that they've budgeted for, and the $59 million at the high school. What's important here is the individual numbers on the side. What's important here is the student factor. That is essentially how many students they expect per residential unit that's built within the city. So as growth occurs, students will start showing up at school. And the rate that they use is 0.19 elementary students, so essentially a fifth of an elementary school for every unit that's built. 0.1 of a middle school student, and 0.14 of a high school student. So basically for every 10 houses that are built, you're gonna get about 2 elementary school students, you'll get 1 middle school student, and you'll get about 1.5 high school students. So that's how they do their growth projections, and then they work through the calculations. So you have the total amount of investment, and you have the number of students that can be fit into the high school, which works out to $67,000, $68,000 per student for that new high school addition. And then they run through the numbers, and so the number of students per house works out to about $8,000 worth of improvements of elementary school, and about $6,800, $7,000 worth of improvements at the high school, for a total of $12,000 per house, single family.
All right, may I ask?
Go ahead.
I have a question. I'm not sure you're the right person, maybe Mr.
Okay.
Green is, but it talks here about a 15% reduction calculated, single-family fee amount. Can you please explain that so we understand what that means?
Okay, so our code, that number, I asked them this specifically because I didn't get it because I wasn't paying attention. But I actually had to go back and reread through our code. Our code specifically says that when you come up with this number, you run it through the calculations, and the actual amount that would be charged to an individual property owner is more in the neighborhood of $6,900. Our code specifically says there is some public benefit for educating students in our community, and that benefit to the public should be not necessarily charged to the new homeowner, because they are eventually going to be a new citizen and, you know, participate in our community and contribute to the jobs and the economy. So there is some public benefit for each student who goes to school in the community. And they assigned 15% when they adopted the ordinance. So it's just kind of the number that the city chose.
All right, one last question, then I'll let Brian have it, but should we direct specific questions to Mr. Green? Or should you be able to answer some of these
I
questions?
think you could ask me, and then if I'm not comfortable answering it, because it's my analysis of what they've presented, I may be able to answer some of those questions.
All right, what I'd like to know is, because this plays an important role in how we proceed here, but how many students live in Woodland, the city limits of Woodland, and in Clark County? And then how many students live in Cowlitz County and then are projected to live in Cowlitz County? Because my review of this is that Cowlitz County doesn't pay anything for their students to go to school, and the entire burden falls on the 6,000 or some odd residents within the city of Woodland and some in Clark County. So I would like you to elaborate on that,
Okay,
please.
so I can answer some of that, unpack some of that. I know from the comprehensive plan discussion that we've had over the last 8 months that approximately 50% of the students in the school district come from the city of Woodland. Approximately 14% come from Clark County side of the river, but within the school district. And about 36% come from Cowlitz County. And whether that's the bottoms or up the river or Green Mountain neighborhood area.
So how is it in 2019 that Cowlitz County pays nothing for their students to attend our schools?
So that is a great question. Now, part of it is, they do calculate into it that there are taxes that are paid, so the ongoing debt servicing of, say for example, the 60 million, a lot of that will be paid by bonds, and they contribute taxes to pay off bonds, but that's money that's paid in the future, and you pay those as a member of the city. You
But
pay
we
them
also
as well.
pay for the bonds.
You do, yes,
So we pay the taxes, the fees, and the bonds.
yes. So you pay maintenance and operation levy, and you also pay capital levy, as does Cowlitz County.
And Clark pays them.
Yes, and Clark.
I
also.
understand Clark pays it, but it's disproportionate based on 36% of the students.
Absolutely, yes.
What is the city's plan and what is the school district's plan to address that?
Okay. That I will leave to Michael to address.
All right, I will,
Okay.
okay. Brian?
And maybe this is more of a question, is it Michael? Maybe it's a question for him
Okay,
also.
we'll see.
That number, that 58,793,000 for the high school, does that, 55? And $57.
Yeah.
Does that incorporate, that's just capital, that's not teachers, that's not,
Yes,
right?
this is a capital
Okay, so
facilities
it's
plan.
not like just extra students will require extra teachers, it's just capital infrastructure, right?
Capital.
Okay.
So then we're gonna look at more
Multifamily
teachers.
next. Oh, no, we're not gonna talk about that right now.
This
So
is the
maybe
capital
after-
facilities.
Maybe you can bring it up for him to discuss.
Oh, we're gonna go there.
So,
Maybe not tonight.
so impact fees under the Growth Management Act can only be used for growth-related capital improvements. So the fire district can buy new fire trucks because there's more fires that they need to respond to. They cannot pay for new firefighters because those are recurring costs, maintenance and operation, and we still need to pay our firefighters whether growth occurs or not. So growth management has very specific guidelines about what you can use impact fees for. You can pay off debt for new fire stations, and you pay off new fire trucks, you just can't pay off new firefighters.
My experience with schools, for the most part, is impact fees are used for land for new schools or new schools. It's pretty much what commonly happens.
Capital, yeah. So, let's take a closer look. I guess I've kinda already went through that, sorry. So can we back up one more, sorry? So you'll notice down here, the total number per unit is 6,900. With the 15% reduction, it comes out to $5,924, which is why they're asking for 5,900. If you go to the next one, thank you. This is just a close-up look at what I had talked about. Sorry, you can skip this one and skip this one. Okay, so this is the multifamily portion of that. So it's the lower half of the stage. So you'll notice that the rates for multifamily residential are significantly higher. So whereas there's like almost a fifth of a student per single family house, there's almost half of an elementary student per apartment or per multifamily dwelling. And so middle school is almost double and high school is almost double. So essentially what the calculations say is multifamily produces about twice as many students per unit.
Are these like somewhat industry standards?
Question for you.
Are they specific to Woodland? And not that it maybe matters either way, I'm just.
That's a question you can answer. So I'm just trying to explain as to why the numbers are so much more bigger down here. And it's all to the function of the number of students that are generated. So you have these big numbers, big student numbers, and when you get down to the bottom, there's about $22,000 instead of $6,000 of school costs per multifamily unit. So what the school board recognizes in that is, okay, when you take your 15% reduction down, it gets to about almost $19,000 per unit. But they are recognizing that to be consistent with other school districts around here, and for whatever reason they chose to request a $5,900 unit school impact fee for multifamily. So considering our old fee could have been as low as $650 when the capital cost might be $18,000, they are asking for $5,900. That way it's much simpler and it's a flat rate of $5,900 no matter what kind of unit is being constructed that gets contributed.
Okay, so it strikes me that the multifamily still gets a pretty good deal.
Yes.
Better than the single family.
Yes. Compared to the screaming outrageous deal that they are getting today, their future will not be as rosy, but it's still pretty rosy.
Okay, I just wanna make sure I understand.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
They're asking for the same rate for both. Thanks, Melissa, one more. So this is a comparison of our current rate to the recommended rate. So you'll see that some of them have a relatively mild increase, whereas some of them are seeing pretty significant increases that will help compensate for the amount of impact that they generate. And the last thing I added here was a comparable between our school district. So the city of Ridgefield, their fee is $8,800, whether it's single family or multifamily. The city of Washougal has two school districts covering. The Washougal School District has very similar rates, exact same rate for Camas. The city of Camas has 3 interlocking school districts, and generally you see increased in multifamily for the Evergreen School District, and Battleground significantly lower for multifamily. And school district has a pretty wide range. Part of this is because the Vancouver School District is not necessarily growing at a rate that they need to build new schools, whereas Ridgefield has to build additional schools. So the numbers vary between school district based upon how many schools they have, what their student projections are, and how much capacity they have. So you see a pretty big range here, but they're all kind of in the same range as what the city is looking at adopting for the Woodland School District. And I think that might be my last slide.
Thank you, Travis.
I just have one question, because I'm not sure you answered it, but maybe I missed it, but what is the city of Woodland and what is the school district going to do to address the disparative treatment between city of Woodland residents and Cowlitz County? What are you doing?
So at this point, the city has no part of what you need to talk about tonight. Might be making a recommendation to the city council. Should they be higher? Should they be lower? Because that's a difficult question, because we are theoretically subsidizing on the front end 36% of the student load, but we're also subsidizing 66% of our in-city multifamily load. So, but we also need to bear in mind that their total projection is they need to raise $500,000 worth of capital improvements. So if we were to take the multifamily and we were to jack it up to $20,000 per unit for multifamily, that's a true fair cost recovery. But then we're gonna collect $6 million worth of school impact fees, which now means we're subsidizing the 36%. Huge. So instead of raising $500,000 in impact fee, we're raising $5 million in impact fees, which means everybody's tax rate goes down, but the Cowlitz County students are getting a whopping good deal.
My question is, what are you going to do with Cowlitz County? Are you meeting with Cowlitz County? Do you have meetings set up with Cowlitz County?
That's a question for him.
Okay, thank you.
Is there any, that you know, Travis, is there any mechanism for collecting impact fees, school impact fees from the county?
So I believe there's a mechanism in SEPA that would allow them, because I consider this to be a significant adverse environmental impact for our schools. And we recently had a subdivision application in Cowlitz County, and my response to the county when they requested information is I said, there are significant adverse impacts to the city, and we believe you should be charging mitigation fees. And if you don't know how to assess them, I suggested that they just charge the equivalent of our impact fees, because we calculate them.
Right.
They should as well. So we are advocating that, but the county is under no obligation to actually mitigate for our impacts.
Do you know that subdivision you're talking about? Have they gone to preliminary?
They have not applied.
Oh, that was a different
It was at
subdivision.
pre-app.
Oh, they haven't gone any past pre-app?
No.
Okay.
But this is new, because the city has never asked for that before. I know that the school district has asked for it and never got it, but now that there's two of us in the chorus, maybe we'll make some progress.
All right, last question. The city council voted not to expand the urban growth boundary. If the urban growth boundary had been expanded, wouldn't we capture these fees through bringing these developments into the city of Woodland?
I believe absolutely we would. The pre-application conference that we did was for 78 lots, and by my calculation, that's about $385,000 of lost revenue that Cowlitz County will not be collecting, and that will be borne by all taxpayers, including developers, because they are not collecting it. And that is what prompted my comment that that's a significant adverse impact.
Any more questions for Travis?
How much was lost? 70,000?
380.
45.
All right, thank you, Travis, appreciate it. And it's time for the applicant, come on, if you would.
And I may ask you to go back through the slides on a few of them. Michael Green, Woodland Public Schools, 800 2nd Street, and here to answer any questions. Just to begin with, I think the Commissioner Taylor's question about what are you doing about this, we've actually taken multiple runs with the City Council, with the County Council, to get them to update their CEPA to allow collection of they wouldn't be called impact fees, I don't believe, but this the equivalent of impact fees.
Mitigation fees.
Mitigation fees, thank you. And they've really refused, and I believe under the current makeup of the county council, they wouldn't even hear from us at this point in time. It's certainly unfair insofar as Cowlitz is not a growth management county, and Woodland and Clark County are. I wish I had an easy answer for that. A few things that I want to point out or correct for the record. If you could go to go back. So the projected enrollment. Travis had indicated that the growth factor was how we calculated the projected enrollment. To be clear, that's not how we do that. And this actually comports with our 2015 plan as well. The methodology we use is noted at the top, the OSPI, which is the Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction, cohort survival model. What they do is they do a look back of growth over the last 6 years by grade band, and then they project that forward, assuming kind of a weighted average going forward of what growth would look like. We did hire a demographer to look at growth, and actually the anticipated growth, given kind of what we know of growth in the county and the city, is that it likely will be much higher than this. We went with a more conservative number, just believing that was the most judicious approach for us to take. So these numbers were straight off of cohort survival, with the exception of 2025. The OSPI calculation didn't have 2025, so we had to just calculate that ourselves. Commissioner Taylor?
Have you modeled where you expect the growth to come from?
I have not done that personally. The demographer has, let's say the demographer's study was based on many of the applicants that were applying for growth down at the bottoms and elsewhere. So that was considered in there. And I'm not sure that calculates where it comes from as far as where it goes.
Well, but you're saying that, I mean, you must have expectation for growth in Cowlitz County.
Cowlitz and Clark, yes.
Yeah, well, Clark's paying some money. I'm interested in the growth in, the projected growth in Cowlitz.
I don't have the answer to that.
All right, thank you.
And really, because it doesn't factor into these calculations, it's not something we've dug into. Flip one more for me, if you will.
I'd just like to add to that point, Connie, I think we can all deduce where that growth would be occurring, because Clark County's not rezoning their property across the river here, so we know where the growth's gonna happen.
Oh, that's my point exactly, so thank you.
One more, please. And a question was asked about the cost, and whether that the cost, that 58 million, represents the cost for the delta between our current enrollment and what we're coming up with. That cost was actually the construction cost of Woodland High School. The 19,687,000 was a cost of similar sized schools, or similar elementary schools to what we would need in the region. So we're looking at actual construction costs. Current bid openings, though, are coming out at about twice those values. So the cost of school construction is running about $450 per square foot right now, which is just, and we were around 200 per square foot at the high school. Pretty substantial.
All right, may I
So
ask-
that's where we get those numbers.
All right, so do those elevated costs include things like seismic upgrades and things like that, or how do you?
These costs are for new construction, so they don't take into account seismic upgrades of current facilities.
All right, but they would take into account seismic on new construction.
All new construction has to meet current
So
code,
that could,
so yes.
that could account for some of the cost escalation, potentially.
I believe that the biggest cost escalation is associated with just the current market. There are more jobs out there than there are general contractors to do them.
Thank you.
The Woodland High School was built for cheaper than any high school you can build today. It has major seismic
Yeah.
on it.
Thank you.
And if you could flip to the one that had the growth factors on it. So on this one, if you see that student factor of 0.19, 0.10, 0.14, what we did, Paul Dennis out of Washougal, who's a demographer down there, literally pulled every building permit that has been issued in the last 4 years in our school district, and then cross-tabbed that to our enrollment. That's how we come up with those numbers. It is,
Seems like a lot of work.
it's the way that the Growth Management Act says you're supposed to do it. And so we do that every time we have these. The numbers were almost reversed from the last time we did this. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that the last time we did this in 2015 was following the Great Recession, and we did not have a lot of inventory that had been built. Right after that, in this window, we had Lilac Place, which has been a big driver of student population, which really escalated the drivers for particularly the elementary level. And then the build out of Meriwether has also added some of those, but those were the two big inventory pieces that dealt with that.
So I'm a little confused about what that calculation is still. I understand it's the number of new, so it's the growth projected multiplied by the, cost per student divided by new construction?
The calculation of it, it's the cost per student of the school. So what we do is we take the facility cost and we say how many students fit in that facility.
Sure, yeah, I'm still
And that
asking about
becomes the per student
the student
cost.
factor.
And then you multiply
I get it.
that times the student factor to say, if you're expecting all your growth at the high school is our most expensive facility, that would actually drive up the cost. If it were at the middle school where the cost of expansion currently is identified as 0, then it would not impact the fee.
So this equation, it's ugly, but it makes sense to me. What I'm wondering about is what is, completely invisible in that equation is where that student factor comes from. How that number is arrived at.
The student factor is that 4-year look back that we had the demography.
Right, yeah, so I'm looking for a little more clarification on that. How, I understand that it's involved with.
So they pull all the building permits, then they go into our student data system and say,
Match up the addresses.
how many students came at 1721 Meriwether Lane? That's a new building permit.
So they're looking at actual, like how many kids actually came out of each.
How many kids came out of each building permit?
That's why I said that seems like.
Look at Lilac Place, how many kids are in unit 1, how many are in unit 2?
Wow. Over what period of time?
4 years.
4 years.
I believe 4 years. That's from memory, not.
This might be a question for both you and Travis, but Lilac Place is tax exempt, isn't it? Because it's part of the Longview housing, subsidized housing, voucher housing. Do you know that?
I don't know, I'm sorry.
That should be something that might be of interest to both of you to see, because when we have these places like Lilac Place, they're not contributing, they're not paying taxes. and, it
Yeah,
further
I'm not
goes
a
to your
tax
equipment.
expert.
Right.
I'm sure that everybody already knows this, but I just wanted to throw out that impact fees are very different taxes. They're only paid once. They're only paid once when they build the building. It's never charged again. It's only charged to a new unit.
Correct.
So in that way, even if they were tax exempt for ongoing taxes, I'm sure that the building of the building and the impact to the school district itself, they probably still got impact fees when the building was built, because over the lifetime of that building, 15,000 children will go to that school district. Right?
I understand
you
that,
don't?
but I understand it clearly, but we have a number of tax exempt, buildings here from Longview Housing Authority that ongoing isn't contributing to the city of Woodland. So that impacts everything, how you provide services to those students, and it kind of puts you in this position you're at if all the horses aren't being pulled in the same direction.
I don't think it impacts our, the current discussion this evening, though. As far as capital improvement costs, it's not.
The other
It's an interesting discussion, but maybe.
The other
not
statement was
germane.
made by Director Mattson, or, I'm sorry, Commissioner Mattson, around the use of the funds. Currently, the biggest use of the funds in real sense is the adding of portable classrooms. Over the last 2 years, we've had to add 8 classrooms at
So
North
affordable
Fork
classroom, you mean
Elementary.
portables?
I'm sorry.
You mean portables, when you
Yes.
say affordable class, or did you say
He
portables?
said portable,
I'm sorry.
yeah.
Yeah.
I used to work construction, I have terrible
Okay,
hearing.
this year's gone, so I understand.
So that costs more money to add portables, or,
It's, we have to be able to house the students, and it's space that we add until we can have enough students to build a new school,
do
essentially.
you buy them or do you lease them?
We buy them.
Okay, thank you.
The cost of leasing them, might as well buy them.
Okay, thank you.
Plus, they don't ever seem to go away once they put
Yeah.
them there, so I've never seen them taking out portables, I don't think I have, unless they're building a new building.
Other questions?
Just so I'm clear on what the cost of the new high school, obviously that's not a new piece of capital. Is that to pay, are you raising money to pay down bonds on that, or how does that work?
It's really.
Forgive my ignorance.
I'm sorry?
Forgive my ignorance on
No,
on this.
it's a calculation. If you go back to the facility need slide. So, go one down, there you go. So it's anticipated at the high school that we are, going to be needing 10 classrooms, or space for 10 students, not significant need. That's easily absorbed. So it really is a factor of, I don't understand all the ins and outs of the calculation, but it's a factor of the calculation so that it's recognized that we're paying for that facility and it would offset costs at the elementary level. The capital facilities plan, and I don't know if Travis provided you with a copy of the actual plan, but the plan would be that we go from a 5-year elementary school to a 6-year elementary school, and from a 4-year middle school to a 3-year middle school, with the addition of a 4th elementary school in our school district.
Right, okay.
So then you are asking for the 58 for the high school?
59
Get back.
59.
for,
Per
it's
unit.
not for the high school, it's per housing unit.
Oh, no,
Oh.
she's
Looking
talking
at different
about.
numbers. She's looking at 58.
Yeah, I'm looking at the 50, so you're asking for,
Yeah, that's part of the total. Do you have property for a new elementary school?
No.
All right. Any more questions for Mr. Green right now?
I don't have any.
We might holler at you a little later, but
Okay.
thanks a lot.
Thanks,
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, I want to open public testimony at this time. I have a hunch it's gonna be a little fairly limited, but if anybody has anything to add, we would love to hear it. Okay, I'm gonna assume that means no one else wants to speak. Travis, was there anything else you wanted to add? Okay. I'm gonna go ahead and close public testimony at this point then, and we're on to our deliberation about this.
I've always been a strong believer in impact fees. I think that the new units that are causing the impact should pay that one-time fee. I think it's equitable. If you had a family that bought a home and they sent their children to school and then they lived in that home the rest of their lives, they would never have to pay impact fees again. They're not sending more kids to the school. It's just, I just think it's an equitable way for school fundings and to developers to pay for impacts within the school district. Now, we all know that cost just gets added to the price because the developer's not gonna lose money, but I think that's a good part, it's a good point to assess that fee for capital infrastructure. I believe in impact fees, I think they're just.
So, since you have more experience, I mean, I'd like to go back to, actions needed to be taken so that these costs are spread more evenly. I think this is a big deal, and I think that unless people start standing up and demanding Cowlitz County come up to the plate, I don't see why we should keep supporting these kind of fees, because they're not budging on anything. So, I think that when you have 36% of the students coming from Cowlitz County and not bearing any of the cost, I think that is absolutely and fundamentally wrong, and somebody needs to force compliance.
I think Travis and Michael's strategy of trying to use the SEPA as a vehicle to get those impact fees is a good strategy. It's a smart strategy, at least they're asking for it. Now, can they make Cowlitz County comply? I don't know, maybe not. But that's nothing that, I'm not willing to punish the school district because Cowlitz won't cooperate. And if you reduce their impact fees so that they're not in line with the other districts that are around here, I think you're just penalizing the school district for something that Cowlitz County refuses to do, or that their elected leaders refuse to do.
Yeah, that's tricky because, you know, holding kids' education hostage is not, I don't think that's a winning plan.
And again, and maybe I shouldn't feel this way, and you might be right, that I don't feel that the impact fee targets the little old lady on the fixed income, because it doesn't. It's only for the brand new house that the developer just built that is adding impact. And maybe that's why it makes an excuse to me that I don't see it as a penalizing tax. Does that make sense?
Oh, I understand this, but I mean, this has been going on for a long time. At some point, somebody needs to draw a line in the sand and make them pay their fair share. Our school district encompasses a lot of Cowlitz County, and you know, I think if we use the children's education, nothing's ever going to get done. Someone has to do something to get Cowlitz County on board, or I mean, the city chose not to expand the urban growth boundary, where we could have captured that revenue. So are you working with city council to really address this issue and taking a strong position?
So that has been brought up to the finance committee before it came here. And the fact that I've brought it up and you're now bringing it up, the message will be sent to them and to the city council. It's the same message that we brought up with transportation impacts during the last 8 months for the comp plan update. School is just an extension of that conversation, and people are starting to get upset.
So I mean, does the school district, it seems to me that they should be partnering with Woodland on these issues. Do you meet regularly with the school board and?
Not regularly, but I met with the school district and their attorney, I guess she technically is your attorney, their staff attorney, and they agree that this is a problem, and they appreciate the fact that I am starting to rattle the cages, because they've been doing it for a while unsuccessfully.
I feel that we're just, when it comes to Cowlitz County, the school district in particular, isn't negotiating from a point of strength. What does Cowlitz County need from us? Nothing. They don't need anything, so they have there's no carrot that they need, you know, to compromise. I mean,
Can I ask you, Mr. Green, what, how does the capital facilities budget compare to just sort of overall operational budget?
It's really incidental upon the passage of a bond. Currently, we run nearly a $40 million operating budget. But, you know, when you pass a bond and have $60 million to buy a high school, but currently it's a couple million a year, relatively low, less than that.
I like that you could have such a strong position about it, because I think you're correct, and that you're right, that Cowlitz should pay. I don't know if there's anything we can do in our recommendation to city council, except, you know, what, you poking Travis a little bit, go get him. But other than that, I don't know what we can do.
Well, I'm sure Mr. Green would like the added revenue himself.
May I?
Certainly.
Certainly I would, but, you know, the reality is there's no leverage, and we have asked, and if the city chose to not do impact fees, that would only make them happy, quite honestly. They have no drive for impact fees. We would love them, or for mitigation fees, and there's nothing like the Growth Management Act in Cowlitz County, or in Cowlitz, to compel it.
Will you repeat that
Okay.
last sentence?
I'm sorry?
Will you repeat that last sentence?
Nothing to compel them.
Nothing to compel the Cowlitz County to do
Okay.
that.
So I think this is really important, and I think it's something we definitely need to deal with long term. I think, you know, just in the interest of making a little progress on our deliberation tonight, what's really, I mean, the interesting question to me is this slide here, and the difference between, you know, basically, you know, like one blanket impact fee and a little bit finer grained fee schedule. And you know, simplicity is obviously has a lot going for it, but you know, looking at things a little and assessing fees a little bit differently across different types of housing also seems like a reasonable option. So I guess I'm curious what the other commissioners have to say about that.
Could you elaborate and give me an example of what you see? Are you saying increasing fees on apartments per unit?
Well, so for example, we've got, you know, so in the apartment per unit there, we've got, it's parsed out not just per unit, but we have different fees according to how many bedrooms. You know, we've got a different fee for a duplex versus a threeplex or a fourplex. You know, an ADU is a totally different fee, and that, you know, those make some sense to me. You could take it even further, and you could say, you know, you could base it on the number of bedrooms in a single-family residence. You could base it on the square footage of a single-family residence.
I don't think we should go that far.
Sure, yeah, and that's, you know, that's kind of, you know,
Just saying.
that's an extreme, you know,
That's a
taking
little
it
extreme.
even further. But, you know, just to point out that, like, this is not one extreme of what we can do. We kind of, the flat rate of 5,900 is kind of as far as we can go in the other direction of just one fee, each residence, each unit pays the same fee.
Do you mind if I?
I wish you would.
It definitely.
I'm flat fee across all the units. The only one that I would probably more strongly support changing would be an ADU. Typically, your ADUs are limited in size to possibly one bedroom, maybe. How many students are you gonna produce out of an ADU? I mean, I still think that with an ADU, you should still put an impact fee on it, but maybe not the full 5,900. But if it's a 2-bedroom apartment or a 3-bedroom apartment, I'm fine with them paying the same rate. Same with a house. If it's a 2-bedroom house or a 3-bedroom apartment, I don't see a problem with them paying the same rate. Keeps it simple. This, whatever they figured out last time, and sorry if anybody was involved in this room, doesn't make any sense to me at all. It's wonky. Things don't. It used to be that single-family residences were charged a higher impact fee than apartments because they're typically bigger and you can fit more kids in them. That makes sense. You know, apartments have a lot more kids now maybe than they used to. I think it's fine to do a flat rate.
I agree, except for
But
the
this one goes
ADU.
all over the board, and it doesn't make any sense why one would be more and another one would be less.
Well, they're recommending a flat fee, so.
Yeah.
But the ADU, I mean, I think they're limited to 800 square feet, so you're not,
And a lot of these ADUs also are for elderly parents.
That's right. That's
So
right.
I think that giving the ADUs a break would make sense.
I think so as well.
Okay. I don't know to what break that would be, though. Do we, Travis, would we recommend an actual amount for the ADU?
Yeah, I think you
Or we could even, well, whatever we do as a recommendation to the city council, so we could say, hey, ADUs are what, a third for the rare one that might support a child?
So that'd be, what do you think, like 2,000, 1,900?
2,000, make it a nice round number, I don't know.
I would agree with that, because if you look at the
I do
ADUs,
too.
they're usually for
Tiny,
mother-in-law,
yeah.
you know, mother-in-law.
Grandmas.
Yeah, exactly.
Somebody that's coming to stay.
I know what that's.
And I would hate to get one of these planned urban developments that goes through that we've been talking about a little later, if anyone ever expands the growth boundary. But if they work ADUs into each housing plan, you might have more school capacity built into that, I don't know. But still, it'll still be limited because of the size of the ADU itself, so. One could almost argue that not charging on the ADU, but I don't know if I'm willing to go that far.
Well, but then
I bet you
again,
Michael doesn't wanna go that far.
You know, and there is also,
No. Just like could still have a child in there.
well, there's, you know,
Yeah, right, maybe.
the point that Travis raised about, you know, there is just sort of a benefit to our community for education, whether or not that unit ever, you know, leads to additional students in the school. They are still gaining some benefit. And $2,000 isn't chump change by any means for most folks, certainly not for me, but it's also, I would hope, not onerous in the grand.
I know that
Building
Clark.
an ADU.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut
No,
you off.
don't worry about it.
I know that Clark County still charges impact fees on ADUs, they just charge them at the multifamily rate. What they did though is when they came up with their new ADU requirements, they have a temporary, for as long as they feel like it, they're reducing the impact fees on ADUs as an incentive by 75%. But the underlying assessment of the impact fee is still the same as a you know, multifamily unit, so they don't see it that differently.
Okay. Did you have?
Something germane to the ADU conversation in the municipal code, 3.40.040, it states the school impact fee shall not apply to housing which by design or restrictive covenant is exclusively for persons 62 years of age or older. So that may be the exception.
Is that part of like the gated community thing, or is that part of the ADU specific code?
ADU.
How would you determine that it's by covenant or?
Yeah,
Because they could sell it to somebody else.
I have a
Yeah.
problem with that, yeah.
Yeah.
There's no verification.
That's the
Because
problem, is they could sell it.
ADUs are generally for empty nesters or seniors who need somebody.
Or a college student.
Or place.
Or, you know,
So let's-
rarely.
We'll add that to the list of code to address that. That does seem horrible.
Add that to the,
List of codes.
List of
Code
codes to
fix.
address in future meetings. You kinda shifted in a little bit, Tiffany, but do you have more thoughts you wanna share?
No, I think I'm good with the, if we limit the ADU one and.
Does 2,000 sound like
Yeah.
a reasonable number to everyone?
I think so.
Do you think it is?
I think that's fair.
That
It's
sounds
better than, you know, gotta pick a number somewhere, right?
Yeah, unfortunately. I'm curious about, just for the sake of argument, considering the same thing about a one-bedroom apartment. I do know that lots of people share one bedroom with a family. I don't know how many
One
share
bedroom
one
and
bedroom with
studio.
school-age kids. Yeah, or a
And
studio.
studio, which is not defined in there either.
Right. I think, well, perhaps a similar argument could be made for a small apartment like that. Especially the studio. I'm curious about thoughts on that.
Well, I'm aware of, one-bedroom apartments here in Woodland that are housing up to 4 people.
Right.
With today's rents, it's not surprising.
Right, but I mean, they're students, they're with little kids and students going to school, so,
Well, we could just put a square foot limit on it. Anything less than. It's
Right,
just
but
an
We aren't
impact on
doing
it.
that with the ADUs. The ADUs are limited to square footage, so that in fact is
But that
kind
would
of what
take
you're
care
saying.
of, yeah, but that would take care of, if the one-bedroom apartment's less than this many square feet, that would, if the studio apartment's less than that many square feet, that would take care of blanket it all,
But
ADU
here's-
or apartment, 800 square feet or less.
right?
listen, here's the thing.
Not a bad idea.
On the apartments, they're not paying their fair share over time anyway. They're getting a real good deal. Travis, you can attest to that by your numbers. I'm all for $2,000 on the ADU, but the apartments, I think, need to be, $5,900 or part of that flat fee, because anybody who has an apartment, you can pull up the slide, but the difference on what they would pay is considerably less than.
And that's taking apartments as a whole though. We're just addressing one subset of that. And, to address your issue about the point you raised about, people are raising families in these, by the same token, I'm aware of single-family residences housing 12 people, so examples.
But the
They
single
might be-
family pays $5,900.
Right, but that's based on a student factor of 0.19, 0.1, and 0.14, whereas if there were instead, 6 children from that single family, they would be, that factor is skewed in that case.
0.4, yeah.
So they are not paying what we're describing as their fair share. So, I like the idea of also carving out a lower rate for small apartments.
But
Partly in the interest, partly, just because it makes sense to treat them similarly to the ADUs, but also, I think there is a value to our community to have affordable housing options like that. For young folks that are moving out of their parents' house but want to stay in town, for young people moving back to town, having gone away to college, just for retaining a population that has roots here, and doesn't want to have to move away. I think that has value, and by reducing that impact fee, we can, even if it means getting a little less cash. I don't think it's going to be a huge part of our housing stock, and so I don't think it'll have a negative impact on the budget.
I'm starting to kind of,
I like that. I like that idea.
I'm starting to kind of, initially I like that 800 square foot or less, but I'm starting to lean towards Connie's position a little bit, and because of this. Developers build apartments,
And then
homeowners build
19
ADUs.
one-bedroom.
that's right,
Right,
yeah,
so-
that's exactly it.
Yeah.
I think that we would want the savings to go to the individual homeowner more than the developer. And I'm not saying all developers are evil, but
I believe
developers
that.
have more means to pay this fee and
Makes
to
sense.
to mitigate the impacts of this.
That's where I'm coming from.
But then, on the, so again, just to for the sake of argument, to take that further, homeowners build duplexes and fourplexes also.
I think we leave it with just ADUs.
Travis, did you have something to say?
The size limit could incentivize small apartments that are affordable as opposed to a proliferation of 3 and 4 bedroom, which will truly generate the kids. So in a sense, it'll help correct some of the skew in the numbers. So you get a lot of 1 bedroom and studio, you're not gonna get a lot of kids. Whereas if you don't disincentive that, developers are gonna see more big apartments because it means more big money. So it might be an incentive scenario to get smaller families.
And that seems,
And the
That
higher,
seems worth
the high
incentivizing.
density that we so much want that we can't get.
Yeah, so the contractors who are here for a job for 6 months, they can get an apartment as opposed to we're only getting big families.
and I think, and I think that's worth incentivizing, because I think that is a type of housing that
Waffle it back
that
and
is
forth.
lacking almost entirely in Woodland. You know, I know of a couple examples, but really just that, really two. You know, there are undoubtedly more, but not a lot more. And I think that's, I think that would serve a need that our community has that is currently unmet. And I think it's worth incentivizing that a little bit. And I don't believe it will be detrimental to the school's budget.
So is it addressed through occupancy, and then what happens is the apartment gets built and nobody enforces occupancy?
So impact fees are paid when the building permit
No,
is
I
issued.
understand
Oh,
that, but
sorry.
I'm talking about, you know, we give somebody with a 1 bedroom a break, then really they could move the 4 people in like I'm
The
aware of.
apartment leaseor is supposed to be the one to enforce that occupancy code.
And it apparently isn't him, so.
No.
Okay, all right, I just wanted to,
Mr. Green.
Just as a point of information, we have a number of students who live in housing that you'd be really surprised they live in because of family poverty. We've got 3 students who live in Sweets Hotel.
We have a number of students that are homeless.
You know, and we've got a huge number of students who are homeless. So I think the argument that you wouldn't have families in 1 bedroom or studio apartments is probably not supportable by what we see
right.
with many of our kids.
Yeah, thank you. You know, by the same token, you know, people in poverty, I'm not particularly inclined to assess them more fees and raise their rent. And I think that is also just, you know, a value to our community and a human value generally.
I think that we could talk and go back and forth on this all night, and either side is wrong. I don't believe either side is wrong. But I'm gonna make a motion in the interest of creating daylight.
That sounds fantastic.
I move that we recommend approval of the applicant's request, except that, we would like to recommend to the city council that ADUs are charged $2,000 instead of the full $5,900.
I second that.
Okay, motion's been made and seconded. Did you get that
Except the
pretty well, Jessica?
ADUs are what?
2,000.
The ADUs are $2,000.
That's what I thought.
All right, fantastic. I guess, there's we can talk about that motion a little bit, if you're interested. There's more discussion.
I front-loaded my discussion.
All right, okay. I wanna make sure everybody gets a chance to talk, so, Tiffany, anything else before, ahead of a vote? Okay. Connie?
I have nothing.
All right, fantastic. All right, let's go ahead and take a vote then, if everybody's ready.
Commissioner Witten,
Aye.
Commissioner Taylor,
No.
Commissioner Mattson,
Aye.
Commissioner Jensen.
No. Alright, the motion fails.
Do you, I wonder if you guys have the same reason for not liking it? Is it because you want the impact fee break to extend into small apartments and you don't want it to extend to ADUs at all? So like.
No,
you have
that's
to
not
do-
my issue.
It isn't?
Nope.
What's the issue?
So what's your issue? I mean,
Yeah, no,
the motion failed.
Sure, right, but we can, I hope
In
we'll
the
make
interest of
another
making a
motion.
new motion,
Yeah.
I wanna do
Yeah.
one that forms a compromise of some sort.
Yeah, I'm curious what you have to say, Connie. What would you like to change?
No, I strongly believe somebody needs to step up and deal with this disparity between Cowlitz County. And I think that unless we send a message, it's just gonna go on. I understand that Cowlitz County, you think Cowlitz County has all the leverage. I mean, that's probably true, but somebody needs to step up and deal with this, and I think the time is now. I think this is absolutely wrong, that, the little snippet of Clark County and the city of Woodland pays the bulk of this. I think this is absolutely wrong on every front. And I think the city of Woodland and the school district should partner and deal with this head on. And if you can't, you can force an issue. The city council can deal with this through, mitigation fees, but something needs to be done. That's my position.
I don't disagree with you at all, I just wonder if we're penalizing them for something they don't have the power to do.
Yeah, I think Connie's point is really important, and I think we can still, approve some impact fees tonight. I would personally like to add an apartment the same size with the same size as an ADU, I think it makes sense to have a lower rate.
Is 800 the agreed upon
800 is an
threshold?
ADU.
As ADU.
That's the max ADU. You don't have any, if the house is larger, the ADU can't get larger?
No, it can't.
It's just a flat 800?
It's 800.
'Cause
It's a percentage up to 800.
Up to, but it can't
That's the
exceed.
max.
Okay, perfect, that's what I need. All right, I'll make a new movement.
Let's call it a motion, just.
Motion.
We're not doing it.
Okay, yeah. I can understand why you'd wanna change that.
I will second your motion.
I'll wait till he makes it.
I move that we recommend approval to the city council of the applicant's request, except for ADUs and apartments up to 800 square feet should be given the reduced rate of $2,000.
I will second that.
All right.
I'm comfortable with that.
Motion's been made and seconded. I think we can move right on to a vote. Everybody ready for that? All right.
Just a second.
No problem.
Did you second that?
Oh, thanks. Commissioner Jensen,
Aye.
Commissioner Mattson,
Aye.
Commissioner Taylor,
No.
Commissioner Witten.
Aye.
Motion carries. I think.
I like your position, though. I think it's feisty. I like it.
I think with that, we are done with this item and we can move on. Next up on the agenda is public hearing for BSP-19-001, a proposal to expand the Woodland Corporate Center binding site plan to include additional property to the east of the existing site and to adjust the boundary lines for the existing lots within the light industrial zoning district. What have we got for us? Melissa this time, fantastic.
Well, good evening. For the record, my name is Melissa Johnston. I'm Associate Planner for City of Woodland, and tonight I'll be presenting the binding site plan for the Woodland Corporate Center. This includes the applications BSP 19-1, SEP 19-5, a CPAD, and a CAP 17-1 critical areas. The property is owned by Liberty Evans and the applicant is Gibbs Wilson. This application is actually a revision to an existing binding site plan that was initially submitted in 2014. And that was a proposal to build an office park on 6 lots that's now amended to expand 3 of the lots. Here's the project site. It's at the intersection of Dyke Access Road and Sherman Way. It's just to the southeast of that intersection. And
Laser now, okay.
so these are the original lots proposed in 2014, the 6, and this is how they're numbered, 1 through 6, 1 starting in the north and 6 at the south. Now, this area was not initially available in 2014, but the owners have since expanded and purchased this area, which is why they want to redesign the binding site plan to include this area to the east. So, including that area, this is what the new lots will look like in the 2019 binding site plan. 2 of the lots are left off because they're already owned and already under development. The northmost lot is the AMPM, and then there's the Builder's First Trust plant at the lot in the middle, and they're a manufacturer for building parts, construction parts. So the 3 lots that we're discussing in the revised binding site plan for 2019 are Lot 1, Lot 2, and Lot 3 is the way they've renumbered them. So Lot 1 is that kind of L-shaped one, and then Lot 2 and Lot 3 are at the southern end of the site plan. So I'll refer to them like that from here on out, but it's important when comparing 2014 to 2019. Yes?
You said that they're leaving off 1 with in the MPM there on the map, but they still expended it backwards to the property that was available. So it's still part of this revised revision.
That might have been an error in my PowerPoint drawing.
Okay.
So the lots.
If you look at the original,
It's already back there.
it already.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. All right. Thank you.
Sorry,
Thank you.
yeah.
Sorry. I'm jamming.
All right, so I'll take you for a drive-by. We can take a spin through the neighborhood and get an idea where this is. This is as if we're at the Taco Bell, Walmart. We're looking south, and that monument sign is already there that says Woodland Corporate Center. And then we can go south a little bit. Now we're facing the lot. We're looking east toward the railway. This is the main part of the lot. And then now we are at the south end of the lot looking back north. These images were taken from Google Maps, and we started, the very first one was a 2018 drive-by. This is now 2015, so if you can really peer into the distance, the Taco Bell is just under construction up there. So that might look a little bit funny to you from here, but this is the southern end of the lot looking north. Okay. In looking through and comparing the 2014 site plan to the 2019, there were a couple issues that came up that we've addressed in the conditions for approval. One is a comment sent in from another agency, the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife, and they noted that there is habitat for cavity nesting ducks to the east in the woodlands there, around where some of the wetlands were found. And so their recommendation was to show this clearly on the site plan map and to also leave as much as possible snags, trees with cavities, downed logs, and any nut-bearing trees like oaks in the area, to leave those in. And the Department of Ecology noted that there's a little bit of an issue with the utility easement. Just in the drawing of the map, it's layered over where some of the existing wetland is. And it just needs to be notated better on this map that some of those wetlands extend into the utility, but it's not a functionally isolated wetland. It still functions as wetland, it still counts toward wetland, it just needs to be shown on the map.
And that's an existing easement it's already got.
It's the gas
utilities.
pipeline.
Okay. All right.
It's
So
already-
they're
there's
not
something
making
already
any
buried
changes
in
to
that.
that.
Okay.
Okay, great, thank you.
A couple more issues there. The monument sign is already existing up there, so that'll need to be taken into account when there are future signs wanted by the future tenants of this office park. And most of this office park is in the light industrial. The AM/PM is up in highway commercial, but either way, they can only have one freestanding monument sign on their primary frontage, and they can have one for their secondary. But it'll need to be worked out among the tenants how these monument signs are, which businesses are on them, and how it's signed, and how they're going to count their total numbers of signs.
So that's for the whole development, not
The
per
whole
lot.
development.
Okay.
That's right. The original binding site plan from 2014, it says in there that the owner is responsible for the landscaping that is to the north of the AM/PM around the monument sign, which we have kind of nicknamed the landscape triangle. So the owner is responsible for it, or can designate a specific tenant and come up with a contract with them to maintain that triangle, and it's in need of some maintenance currently. So that's written into the conditions to carry forward that become resolved. There are also quite a few landscaping requirements still to be met in this 2019 plan. It's not fully drawn out how many parking spaces there will be, and subsequently then there is a ratio of trees to parking spaces that needs to be ironed out, and we will carry that forward into the future individual site plans and make that a requirement of each of those developments to have the correct number of trees and the correct spacing for them. There are lot coverage benchmarks to make. The entire lot needs to be at least 10% landscaped, and the parking area itself needs to be 10% landscaped. So we'll keep looking at the applications to make sure.
This may not be relevant specifically to what you're talking, how do you landscape the parking area, just through islands?
Yes.
They just put islands every once in a while?
Yes,
You have a
everyone's,
designated
and
number?
yes,
Okay.
there is.
Like 7 spaces?
Yes, I
something
think
like
it's just about that. I think it's 6 wide.
I think that was
Probably like Clark's.
I feel like you have some prior knowledge on this.
Lucky guess.
All right, so this is all that exists for the landscaping plan. So they've got the frontage pretty well landscaped along Sherman Way, but the rest is a mystery when we start looking at the lots. And again, this is the overall aerial. And a couple remaining things. They have yet to write their stormwater covenant, but there are examples from Public Works, and we can mentor them along in that process. What else? They've only indicated 2 fire hydrants, and they're required to have at least 4, so we've written that in as a condition of approval. And a representative from the Cowlitz tribe contacted us to ask about cultural resources on the site, and there is likeliness of that. However, it's already been graded and it's already covered in. So we'll have to continue addressing this through each of the subsequent site plans.
Did they had to do a SEPA with the first binding site plan, right? Because
They
it was-
did.
So they had to do an archaeological predetermination with that SEPA likely, right?
They,
didn't find anything, they didn't find, either they didn't find anything or they reburied it really quick.
with the binding site plan, they did not, because there was no development plan. They subsequently came in for a SEPA to do some grading, and so if we go back to the aerial, you'll see that big gray area. That's material that has been brought in to settle, and so technically the natural undisturbed land is between 4 to 7 feet below the current level. So there won't be any disturbance of the natural ground, but if they come in with a proposal that does require,
Well, they'll
stories
be-
underground, they would have to do additional work
Just
at
their
that time.
utilities and stormwater and stuff will probably be down in there.
Are you
but-
saying that they were surcharging the site for building load? Is that what you're saying?
I'm not sure why they did it, but it is prepped with,
That is a
material.
valid reason they do that, though.
Oh, I
Right.
know, I know.
So if the Cowlitz County, or the Cowlitz tribe isn't, they're not requiring one, or they're not asking for one? They
No,
just
not
got
at this
discovery
time, but
language?
they mainly sent in a question to start the conversation, but they didn't provide a direction like the other agencies did.
Well, if they're not demanding one,
No, not at this time.
you just put the standard discovery language on there. Find the dinosaur Chief Seattle turned in. Basically what it says.
Right.
Other questions?
conditioning the approval with everything that's required, right? That's what I've gathered. You like it, I think it's great.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, unless he wants to
Thanks,
talk us
Melissa.
out of it.
Thank you.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know, I guess, my only concern, and it's pretty minor just based on where this is just looking at that little bit of landscaping plan, it doesn't look like they plan to really orient construction toward the street, which I think is generally important to make our streets, useful to the community. But I think if we can let that slide anywhere, it would probably be an industrial development.
Would you rather have a boxy industrial building in front, or would you rather have the parking lot islands, a little bit of the trees in the building in back?
Well, I think
with this type of building, I'd rather have it in back.
We're asking for the parking to be either on the side or behind it.
Oh, you are?
That is, yeah, that's part of our, I believe that's in code and it's also in the.
Yeah.
For the industrial one.
Yeah. Which I think is.
So I'm sorry, one more time.
Talking about where so I like to have buildings sort of address the street instead of being, having just looking at
For
the parking
retail,
lot.
for sure.
Sure, yeah, but just.
So like in the commercial zone, like the Verizon and the Taco Bell, it requires them to be as close to the street as possible. That is not required in industrial, because quite often you'll have more attractive parking lots than the actual structure and the lay-down area, storage at the back of the lot.
Is your binding site plan set up that that the applicant has to determine at least a type of use, maybe not super specific, but a type of use for each of these lots? And I don't know if it's a requirement or not. I know Clark County's does. They have to put in some sort of statement of what these things are gonna be, and then they're held to that use, which I would never do if I was the developer, but.
And that's the school I came from as well, but our code, and as the previous approval shows, that's not how it was applied in Woodland. So we're this is the second generation of what was already approved.
So basically, none of those lots will be built out until they have a tenant willing to build a building, so they don't truly know what's gonna happen. So that's why she's have to add all these conditions, cause there's no plan to go off of yet. We don't know how ugly or pretty that building will be.
Well, the port does the same thing all the time, so that's the way it is. So is this a public hearing? Do we hear from the applicant?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. Is the applicant here to make a presentation?
I assumed you were the applicant,
I thought
sir.
you
I'm
were.
sorry. Good.
So did I, so excuse me.
Us too.
Just to dot our i's and cross our t's, I'm gonna open it for public testimony right now. And I would love some public testimony. Doesn't seem to be any interest in any. I don't know if we got time don't need a staff response really. So I'm gonna go ahead and close public testimony and then we'll just chat about it. I would like just, the first site plan for this was one of the early meetings that I went to, and it was, I don't remember exactly what the application was that night, but the fellow representing the applicant had just broken both his arms in a bicycle accident. And he was trying to move some presentation around on an easel, and he was doing a pretty good job, until we voted to deny his application, and then he tried to gather all his stuff up at once with two broken arms and casts, and was dropping everything. He was trying to stomp out in a huff, and I have fond memories of that night. So I wanted to share that. The city council ended up approving it anyway, despite our recommendations, but it was, that was early in my time on the planning commission.
Well,
But we can move on now.
Okay, I'd like to get to the business at
Yes,
hand.
please.
I don't see any reason why, Melissa has addressed all the issues.
Yep.
It brings revenue to the city and it's a good place for it. And as long as the environmental issues are addressed, then I see no problem with it whatsoever.
And that's, I think the conditions are good.
Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife said that they were okay with the buffers and that sort of thing, so. That's the experts, in my opinion.
That's right.
I agree with you, Connie.
All right, yeah,
Sure,
I think
we
the,
should-
Wildlife's
We're
good,
agreeing
we
on
should be
stuff.
good.
yeah, and ecology was involved too. I think, yeah, as conditioned, I think it's pretty straightforward, so. Thanks to staff on that.
Would you like to make your first motion?
No. I don't really know how to make a motion.
Wow.
Well, let's learn.
We've got.
This will be
yeah,
you next week.
Pretty, I wish I had, actually have my guide I want to give you.
I wanna make a motion. My guided tour.
Basically, you say you'd like to make a motion and what? What you would like to do. In this case, I think it would be to, approve the application as conditioned.
As position.
Yeah.
I would like to make a motion to approve the application as conditioned.
I second that motion.
Okay.
All right, Brian beat you. Okay, did staff get that motion pretty well? It's pretty simple. I think we can go ahead and vote on it.
Who seconded?
Brian, Madison.
Commissioner Mattson.
Aye.
Commissioner Taylor.
Aye.
Commissioner Jensen.
Aye.
Commissioner Witten.
Aye.
Fantastic. Motion carries. I think, we're done with that item, we can move on. Next on the agenda is a discussion workshop, but it sounded like maybe we're not quite ready for that. Okay, so, I don't know, do we need a motion to skip that, or can we just skip it? It's not a public hearing, right? We can just.
Good question. I would think you need a motion to reschedule that to the later
Okay.
meeting.
I move that we reschedule the discussion workshop on multifamily / PURD code discussion until the July meeting.
I'll second that.
Wait,
We can
one
discuss
second.
it.
Are you gonna be ready to do it next time? Or should we push it farther out?
We will,
We can always
Maybe
push it out,
August?
yeah.
Well, yeah, you got, okay.
Oh, okay. All right, then I'll second that then.
Okay, it's, motion's been made and seconded. It was motion by Commissioner Taylor, seconded by Commissioner Witten. Let's vote.
Commissioner Jensen.
Aye.
Commissioner Mattson.
Aye.
Commissioner Witten.
Aye.
Commissioner Taylor.
Aye.
Motion carries. Great work. I think you do have some staff reports for us, Travis?
we do, there's a couple documents that we sent in the packet. One of them is this file, and what this is this is our current number of permits that have been received to date. And it's a month-by-month tracking of full permits and the residential permit numbers. What the only thing that's might be of interest, and that is when you look at the residential section, at the time that this report was run for May, there were only 2 residential building permits, and we are basically at the start of the building season. So that number has since jumped to 6. But if you have read this article in the Daily News, it talks about how prices in Cowlitz County have been rising significantly for housing, and a lot of it has to do with a shortage. And it goes on to point out that Cowlitz County has added 199, or is adding 199 residential units. And then the very last sentence in the article is, oh yeah, by the way, the city of Woodland has added 6. So as we talk about the disparity of traffic and revenue and schools and revenue, it is only getting worse as the county continues to grow at an accelerated rate, and we do not match pace. So
Can you give me those numbers again, please?
You can have the article if you want, but I believe it's 199 and 6.
I got the 6th part.
Oh,
It was
yes.
the 199
Yeah.
thing I was missing. Thank you.
Although we do have 2 new houses coming in and we expect them to be reviewed, so we might have 8.
I think we'll have some more soon.
Yes. So until we get more subdivisions, there's not a lot of residential growth in our future. The other document that is in your packet, and that is the building permit valuation. Residential construction, we have $1 million worth of valuation of new construction for residential. We have 10 million commercial and industrial new construction. And the reason why this is interesting is because in 2017, we had about 17 million residential and about 2 million commercial and industrial. And last year, it totally flipped on the head. It went to about 7,000 residential and about 13,000 industrial and commercial. And this year, it'll probably be about 20,000 in industrial and commercial and about 1 million in residential. So there's a lot of industrial and commercial growth, just a giant bump in that, so.
Travis, I have a question.
Yeah.
Okay, here's the thing I don't understand. Okay, so, and I mean, I'm really serious. So the city council voted not to expand the urban growth boundary, and in reviewing the letters from WashDOT, they said, you know, the city of Woodland has to demonstrate a need, but before they'll commit to like exit 21 and different roads, I'm sure you've done some kind of, or project some kind of traffic study, but here's the thing, how are we gonna get money to fix this if the growth is in Cowlitz County and Woodland hasn't expanded its urban growth boundary?
That is a great question. We are currently going through a study of exit 21, and one of the exercise that we're doing is we're taking a look at all the traffic studies that we've received, and I also gave you a copy of this, so you have paper copies of this. The blue section is industrial projects that we have improved since I've been here, since January of last year. The pink is commercial projects that have been approved, and the yellow is residential projects that have been approved or constructed since I've been here. And from our conversation about the comprehensive plan, a large amount of concern was raised about the availability of residential land and how the city is very interested in jobs, but we don't necessarily have the residential to house those new employees. And so there's a lot of trips that are being generated where they're gonna have no choice but to commute from other communities. And the reason why I put this list together is because the traffic studies are going to be affected by not only our current ratio, and my estimate is about 20% of the trips through exit 21 go over the CC Street Bridge into Clark County. So they just pass through the community, pass through our intersection, that don't necessarily contribute financially, because they're not taxpayers, just like the schools. And then also about 30% of it goes up Lewis River Road, at least 30% goes up Lewis River Road into Cowlitz County, and they drive through the community, through the intersections, but not necessarily live in or tax paying. And so when the city talks about growth, we're talking about using our own roads that other people are already using, but they're not necessarily part of the community. So our growth pattern, what we've approved, is about 1,200, about 1,300 additional PM peak hour trips, so rush hour trips going through our intersections. Now they all won't go through exit 21, but a large percentage of them, because they are commercial and industrial trips, are going to be going through exit 21 and exit 22 because they're either employees who don't live here or they're business trips that are not delivering to Woodland or coming from Woodland. So the numbers that you see down below is of those trips, only about 9% of them are actually going to be residential trips, and 55% of them are industrial trips, and about 35% of them are commercial trips. So the amount of traffic that is coming is going to be considerable, potentially an extra 40 to 60% additional traffic from commercial and industrial sources. And the next column here that you see is the date that the project was approved. And if it was actually built, so this is Atlas Plumbing, they built in 2018, so they're about 1 p.m. trip in the evening. It's already on the road because that building is built. The trailer depot across from the Taco Bell, they are built and they have about 6 trips in the evening. And Ace Hardware, it's built, and so it contributes about 21 and a half trips in the evening hour. So the actual number, so as people complain about traffic is worse now than ever before, it only represents about 10% of the growth that's going to occur based upon city growth. That doesn't include county growth and Cowlitz County growth. So things are bad, and they're gonna get a lot worse, and Cowlitz County and Clark County are going to even amplify that in the future. So, to get to your issue, yes, the traffic and the impacts of the transportation system are coming.
Okay, so how are you going to address this with WashDOT and the letters they sent?
So, the Exit 21 study is being paid for by funds from the Department of Transportation and the Council of Governments, and the implications of that study are going to narrow down to several improvements for Exit 21 that will be evaluated, and we have about $800,000 to start a design for next year. So we will have a study done by the end of this year. We should select a fix, and we will start the design. It will then be up to the Department of Transportation, the city and Cowlitz County, to start banging the drum to get the funds to fix it, because there are significant problems now, and that's nothing compared to what they're gonna be like in 4 or 5 years when we need to start constructing that fix.
When you do that traffic study, if it shows that the off-ramp is failing, does that move you ahead in the priority then?
That is a really good question. The problem that we face, and that is we straddle Cowlitz County and Clark County. The Cowlitz County RC, Regional Transportation Organization, we have not necessarily brought this issue to their attention, so we're not necessarily high on their list. With Clark County, there are a lot of people and a lot of organized efforts to get transportation money, so we are essentially in the back of both lines. But given the information and the fact that we're starting to pay attention to a problem that's developed over the last 10 to 20 years, I don't think that they're gonna have the luxury of putting us off, because it is practically an emergency, and they recognize that everybody's been ignoring it to this point.
The state works that way though, don't they?
I believe so.
I mean, for sure you do.
But it's also a federal issue. We also have to recognize that it's a regional transportation corridor. It's federal transportation money and state transportation money, plus regional connector. So it's a county, 2-county, city, state, and federal problem.
They had an approved plan at one time on that exit.
So in 2013,
I
we
saw
looked.
the options that were presented.
In 2013, we did a study of the Scott Avenue Reconnect, and they looked at about 16 or 17 potential scenarios. Not all of them were viable, and not all of them are available, but essentially the best option would be to elevate I-5 and to connect Scott Avenues, but it cost, I think it was $80 million.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, it
the
was $80
Department of
million.
Transportation said, yeah, no, you can drive around to get to Safeway from that
Yeah.
side of the city if you need to. We'll spend our $80 million in Seattle or Vancouver, right? But now what kinda drives me crazy is that was 2013, we had money for 2014 design. Takes about 5 years to get your money to build. 2014, 2019, those improvements, if we'd looked at exit 21 way back then, 2019 construction season is when we would be fixing exit 21. But here we are, 7 years, 6 years later, and no progress whatsoever. We're just starting the study.
They
that-
could be in a worse spot to try to widen either. I mean, there's a lot of other
Yeah.
constraints.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
Is that for staff reports?
Yes.
All right, thank you so much, Travis.
Oh,
And-
sorry, no, we do have one more thing. Sure. Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Travis, there's a
Oh,
slide
yep.
too. Okay, thanks. Alright, so we have a new tracking sheet that we're using now in the planning department, and it has two main purposes. The first is as a visual conversation piece. We'll bring this to our development review committee meetings and planning commission and council so we can show a snapshot of what's occurring in the city. So mainly this is for conversation at meetings. We also have a software program that we're using for formally tracking all of the permits. So we're not tracking all of the permits in the city through Excel, but this is what we use to develop this visual conversation piece that we'll be bringing. The second purpose of it is to help bridge a gap between the planning department and the building department and help carry forward projects from start to finish, from their initial pre-application all the way through grading and building permits, and help us communicate through the process. And so the first sheet I've handed out is where we're going to track our pre-applications, and that's on the smaller 8.5 by 11. All of the permit numbers listed on the left, a description of the project, their location, and if it's been routed, if we've held that pre-application meeting is the next column. And then finally, if it's gone all the way through and that applicant has decided to formally submit an application, the application number is recorded there. So we can track it on the next sheet. This is about 4 pages long at this point, so I've just brought the first page today to discuss, and there's still time to give me input on this. We can recreate it a little bit with your feedback. If there's something that you would rather see or a format that you would rather, I can implement that. So this is just one part of that longer report. But in general, what this is showing you is the permit number on the left, and then the project and the address or a description of where it's located, a description of the project, and there are notes on the actions taken in the next column. And then we can see a timeline moving left to right, and I can see when it was submitted. If I don't have the date, because I took 2 years of projects to build this spreadsheet and then filtered out what was still relevant. Some of these I didn't quite know exactly when something occurred. I just put yes, so you see a Y. I know it happened, I don't know exactly when. So on the timeline, you'll see when it was submitted, if it's been routed to our development review committee. I'll notate if we made new addresses, if Public Works assigned a new address for it. Then next is when it was declared fully complete. Then NOA is notice of application, and I also include when we've published or posted it physically on site or published in the reflector. Comment deadline, SEPA comment deadline, and then you'll see if we have held a planning commission hearing, if it went to hearing examiner, if we did a council hearing, and then if it had a city council first read and second read. So then you'll see that there's different colors on here. So I've chosen colors for light green, that it's occurred, darker green, we're waiting for it to occur, and gray is it's not going to apply to the specific timeline for that project.
I really like your color scheme because they're not so close, you can actually distinguish the colors.
Yeah.
So many of the maps, you know,
Yeah.
I mean, they all bleed together, so good job, thank you.
Okay, very good. It makes me want mint chocolate chip ice cream, really. Okay, so then, I've noted what our decision is and the date. So moving from that point to the right, we've kind of left the planning realm and we're now more into the building and public works realm. We'll notate that we've received final engineering drawings and that the dates that we've reviewed them. We'll mark when we have signed final engineering drawings. And then put the date of our pre-con meeting. We'll put the dates of our building permits and grading permits and right-of-way permits. And then we'll also notate that we've got the as-built and the occupancy permit. And I was speaking with our building inspector today to talk about the occupancy permits, and we're going to start a process where he has us sign off on them as well, so we can ensure that we have, in fact, received the as-built before we sign off on occupancy permits.
And for things like landscaping and things.
And making sure that the landscape, exactly. Yes, there's actually a whole slew of things that we would like to make sure are in place before we issue those occupancy permits, so that ball is rolling to have that.
And it gets you out of the office.
Oh, yeah, maybe so. Well, I'll do a ride along with him pretty soon, so I don't think that'll be a regular thing that's going out there, but yes, some job shadowing will happen. Hey, any revisions that you would like to see? I can easily update this spreadsheet with your
Maybe
suggestions.
it's slightly lighter green for the areas in building.
If you
I
think
think
that
that's great. It's really
All
nice.
right.
Yeah.
If you think that it
And we
needs
can
next.
track it, because there's really no way to do that without pulling up multiple cases, and you'd have to know what you're looking for. And it's
Yes,
handy.
Great.
Thank you.
thank you.
And we imagine that this will eventually be available on the website, so that if you have a question about something you see tonight, for example, the second case on that is the one that you've approved tonight. So 2 months from now, you can look and see if they're making progress. How
And
much?
15 minutes after you've approved something, the applicant will call you and ask why it's not updated on your website.
Yeah. Can't wait. All right, thank you very much. That looks great, Lisa. Appreciate it. I think that about wraps us up.
Yeah, I forgot mine. Number 3.
You need a motion to adjourn?
I think so. Yeah.
I move we adjourn this meeting.
I second that motion, short time.
Anyone opposed? Thus ends planning commission meeting. Thanks, everybody.
Sweet.